Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Horror Movie Night. This episode is being brought to you by our Patreon subscriber, Megan Williams. You can find her at Z Kitty Podcast. She is the host of the Zombie Kitty Podcast, and she has been a long-time listener. I feel like Megan's been around since maybe like the third or fourth episode, honestly. So thank you very much, Megan, for your Patreon donation. We are always happy to have you, and just a reminder, you can also get a shout-out like this if you head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/HMN podcast, and donate. But enough of that garbage and that, give us money shtick that we're doing. Let's talk about some horror movies. This week on Horror Movie Night, I'm the killer. No, I'm just kidding. Scott's the killer. Actually, what's really happening is this is a hangover-induced fever dream that Adam's having. Actually, none of that shit even matters because we watched 1981 Student Bodies, a film so overtly stupid with no coherent story that it is even required. So come and join along on the insanity as we discuss on Horror Movie Night. So, I picked Student Bodies from 1981. And I feel like this was probably the pick of all of the picks that I've done in recent times that Scott was the most like, are you really sure you want to do Student Bodies? He messaged me a couple times and was like, are you sure? Like, you don't have to. We could do something other than Student Bodies. But
was I that about it? Because kudos to me if I was.
But I was like, no, I really want to talk about Student Bodies because I like I feel like this movie is funnier than it should be, but it still isn't very funny. Like, if that makes any sense. But
I have to disagree with you. I think it's a lot funnier than it should be. Like, it shouldn't be as entertaining as it is to watch this film, especially because the movie is 35 years old now.
Yeah. But there's something about this movie. I had always heard about this movie, and finding a copy of it was super difficult for a really, really long time. When it came out on DVD, I just bought it without ever seeing it because I'd heard so much about it. And I was really entertained and watched it with a group of friends. But I think it's important to point out that this movie, the year that this movie came out, is extremely important to this movie for me because it is so early in the beginning of the 80s slasher craze. Like, this isn't like this came out in 88 or 89. This came out when all that really existed was Halloween and Friday the 13th, but they already kind of saw...
Well, no, there was also... No.
And Prom Night.
No, listen. It's making fun of the first wave of slasher flicks because it was 78 to 1980 was the first wave. So, there was a lot of stuff. Like, The Prowler came out in 80 or 81, and the Madman was 1980. There were a bunch that we just don't remember because they were so mediocre. It's making fun of the very first wave of slasher flicks because people thought that that was like a short-lived thing, that people were going to get sick of it and you weren't going to see any more of those. So... But then we had that big resurgence, like around 84, I want to say, and those are the ones that we usually think about and talk about because they're probably a lot better than the first wave.
I'm going to say this much is that I think that this does horror movie parody way better than Scary Movie. I think that it has more.
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah,
it has that airplane like anarchy behind it, that thought process of just like, we're going to just go fucking balls to the wall. We're not going to go for the gross out joke. We're going to go for the absurdist joke. And that's what this movie is. Adam summed it up in his intro perfectly. Like, this movie is just absurd. Like, there's not a coherent moment in it, but I don't think it ever intended to be coherent.
No, it's not at all.
And the jokes are so funny, though, because they... Maybe it's because we're so programmed to assume that the gross joke is going to happen that when it doesn't, we're like so appreciative, I guess. But which is awkward to even say, but it makes sense though that it the first funny thing about this movie, I think, is that that they play off all of the teenagers wanting to have sex and then getting murdered in really funny ways. Like, it's not meta because it's not like fourth wall breaks as much as it's kind of like a wink and a nod. I don't know how to really put it together, but that first set of kills where he gets in the shower and then he's like, Julie, you're not responding to my maleness.
Yeah, that's the best line in the movie. That's my favorite line in the movie. Julie.
It's up there. Because really, I think I didn't take any real notes for this movie. All I did was write down the quotes I thought were funny.
Here's the thing. You can't take notes for this movie. This movie takes its own fucking notes. It has it on screen for you. It'll just be like, oh, look, those are clues. Oh, this guy's a suspect now. It'll literally flash on screen and tell you that shit. It's like, come on. What do it's doing it all for me. I can't do anything.
I just love
Yeah, I guess maybe that's why I was worried about Matt picking this, because I was like, it's hard for us to talk about horror parodies, but this movie just is... I feel like it doesn't get the credit that it deserves. I'd never watched it before this because I was like, ugh, the scary movies are such shit that I don't want to watch another joke horror movie that's making fun of the genre, but this is so much funnier. Like, they got it right the first time. They should have never made scary movies.
I just like even the joke of like having the killer be so loud and intrusive, like just like like just this deep breath.
He's like, why am I wearing these galoshes?
It's just so many stupid gags, and there's that one. The one line is so absurd in the movie. It's like in the middle of the movie when he calls the principal, and he's like, "What are you doing to your voices?" "I'm talking through a chicken." It's like, that doesn't explain anything. It explains nothing. Oh, it's so dumb. It's so fantastically dumb. And then we have the most infamous thing in this movie. Malvert, the weird actor known as the Stick, who plays the janitor, and he no one knows who he is. He died like in the late 80s, but no one knew who he was until recently. People had to do like research to find out anything else about the dude.
That's depressing.
Yeah, but
he's just a crossword enthusiast. That's all.
Yeah, it's five letters. It's just like, creep!
Malvert, thanks.
Man. I mean, I did, there were some spots where I was like, man, this is kind of getting a little hard to fight my way through, because the Malvert jokes were getting a little stale, particularly, but, I mean, it's so ahead of its time, which is so weird to say.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, and like I said, I actually, even going into it, had been told that it wasn't good. Like, I had seen, like, on horror websites that I trusted as a kid, it only getting, like, 1-star reviews. And being like, all right, well, what? I know that I'm buying this, and I know that it's not going to be good, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. And I was like, I think this is fun. Like, I still don't think it's a good movie, but I think that it achieves a lot more than people are willing to give it credit for.
But what are they expecting to get out of a horror parody? It seems just absurd.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, it gets 1 star because it's not coherent or it's not funny. Like, it's a horror parody. Shut up and enjoy it.
But I will say this much: the very ending of the movie, before we get to like the Wizard of Oz stuff, where she's running through the school, and it's just like all of these people jumping out of the rooms, is actually a well done like horror scene. Like, it's still, like, absurd and ridiculous, but the way that the coloring is and the light and, like, the way that they're popping out from behind the doors is it's actually a pretty effective, like, scary final sequence of a slasher movie.
Yeah.
And then it, reveals that it was all this weird dream, which
is also fun. That's a joke in itself, because that's such a played out, like, it was all a dream. Like, nobody, that's the worst writing. I mean, when I was in, like, 5th grade, or maybe 3rd grade or something, my teacher was like, my English teacher said, don't ever use the "it was all a dream" trope, because it's so played out. I will fail you if you do that trope at the end.
Well, I do love the way that everyone is, like, sort of like their character. Like, the teacher obsessed with doing the horse head bookends is the French teacher, and she's like, and in my dream, you weren't my French teacher. She goes, I will always be your French teacher. Like, or she's like, and Professor Malvern, you were just a janitor. Absurd. Like, it's so ridiculous.
The horsehead bookends thing might be my favorite scene in this movie.
Because it's so ridiculous that it just keeps coming up as a story.
And he keeps saying horsehead bookend. Like, it's I mean, it just comes out of nowhere. It's so good.
They said that so much that it lost all meaning. I was like, I don't even know what these words mean anymore. Horsehead bookend. Like, what is going on?
But yeah, I think that it just has so much fun with all of what it's doing. Having the killer continuously pick the least threatening weapon. Like, that opening shot of him and his hands just cruising past, like, a knife and a noose and a gun, and then he just settles on a paperclip, I feel like sums up everything you need to know about this movie. Like, that is the entire tone of this movie wrapped up in a nice little package for you. Like, that's it. Like, that's what this sense of humor is.
That's the thing about this movie for me, is that the jokes are funnier because it seems like they actually took a little bit of time to write them, instead of just going for the low-hanging fruit like Scream movies or scary movies.
Yeah. Well, and it even has this, there's a joke in this movie that is a lot funnier than I think people realize. To me, because I missed it the first time around, was in the very beginning. The babysitter gets gets murdered at the house with her boyfriend, and then the family who she's supposed to be like house/babysitting for shows up, and the wife is storming through the house, and she's freaking out at all this stuff, and she keeps saying, for 75 cents an hour, she's gonna do this, and she says 75 cents an hour like multiple times. But then at the end...
And then she says, cheaper. Yeah,
at the funeral, she's like, now, as you know, it was 65 cents an hour, and I still feel like I need to pay you out for that. Like, it's like...
Yeah, that is such an underrated joke. I was thinking the same thing.
That mom was acting like one step away from the sleepaway camp mom. She was going crazy.
Oh, it was great. She had a little ribbon tied on her finger and shit. No, that movie...
No, you know what else is funny about that? The first part of the scene, or first part of the movie, the first scene, is when the dad finds the chicken, and he's like, chicken, broken. And then he puts it back together with a rubber band and puts it back in the fridge. See, those jokes are so funny. You're right, it's Airplane. Yeah, it was bugging the crap out of me what the humor was from. But
no, this is definitely
Airplane.
Someone watched Airplane and was like, we could do a horror movie version of Airplane. And I think they succeeded. I think that if you enjoy Airplane and the fact that Airplane has no coherent storyline, it's just whatever we can do to link together these gags and quotes and whatever, like, you will like Student Bodies. And I feel I don't understand the big push of people saying that it's not a well-done movie. And that's why I wanted to pick it, honestly, was that I feel like it's still not a well-known movie, and if it is known by anybody, it's usually in a very negative way by people who have never actually watched the movie.
Yeah.
Because it does just have so many absurd jokes, so much absurd story. Everyone's a character. I mean, there's a scene where literally a blind guy and a black guy, or a blind black guy and a dude in a wheelchair fighting over who has like the worst disability. Like, it's just so much going on in this movie.
Yeah, if you like absurdist humor, and if you were somebody that enjoyed Airplane, this is definitely the movie for you, because it's just chock full of fucking insane, crazy jokes. And you can tell, like you said, there doesn't really need to be a coherent story, because they're just trying to string together all of these different jokes and set pieces that they have, to the point where they literally stopped giving a shit about what the plot was. And at the end of this movie, there's like 4 different twists that all make no fucking sense as to what's going on. Like, it's like the principal or whatever was supposed to be the killer at first, right? But there's a scene earlier on where both the principal and that other chick that they're supposed to be like doing it together are in a scene, and the breather is out killing somebody else. So there's no physical way that they could have fucking kill it.
Yeah, or they get the phone call from the killer and they're all in the room together. Like, there's literally no way that could be the case. Which is why when it's written off as a dream, you're like, okay, well that makes sense because it's a dream. None of this needs to make any sense. But then it was a fever dream induced by sexual repression, which is like also absurd. But then her boyfriend kills her anyway, dressing up like the breather. But then it has a Carrie ending, like, immediately after that. Like, it's just, like you said, it's just a twist after a twist after a twist after a twist. And if you think about this coming out, right around the time of Friday the 13th, like, that makes a ton of sense. Because Friday the 13th does have that, like, twist. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, you find out the killer's some chick that hasn't been in this movie at all. She's just a kindly old lady who just shows up in the last 15 minutes of the movie to reveal that the boy who drowned in the lake was her son. And then it's like, okay, we're going to give you her motive and everything right now. And then all of a sudden the little boy's still alive in the lake. Like, it's like this double whammy of, like, absurd twist, which, as us in the future, having seen all of the Friday the 13th movies now, know how all of that links together into, like, Jason's origin story. But while you're writing this movie where that's, as far as you know, a one-time movie, you're like, what the fuck was that shit? Like, I think that it makes sense, again, when you think of the time in which this movie was written and released. I don't even know how well this movie did I bet this movie did abysmal in the box office, actually.
I don't know. I'm wondering.
But, like, I also love that they wanted the R rating. So there's this scene where it literally just cuts to a guy who says, fuck you, so they can get their R rating.
Yes! Oh, man, that part is really funny.
All right, it made $5.2 million in the box office. I can't imagine that they spent that much more than $5 million on making this movie.
Oh, yeah, it definitely probably made its budget back then.
It became famous as a late-night cult favorite on cable, is all it says. It was released on DVD in 2007, which is the copy that I have, and then it was released in an HD Blu-ray in 2011. So, you can get this movie. There are places to find this movie, and you should track it down, and you should watch it, because it really is super underrated and a lot of fucking fun. And that's pretty much where I'm going to wrap up on this. I did know, picking this movie, that it wouldn't be our longest episode, but I was okay with it because I more so wanted to try to expose this movie to some of our listeners. So if you're looking for a last-second Christmas gift for that horror fan in your life, you should grab them a copy of Student Bodies, because there's probably a good chance they've never seen it, and they will be delighted by it.
Yeah.
So now is my turn. Last week we allowed Scott to take the podium and try to convince all of you guys to vote for Beastmaster in our little poll that we have going on our Facebook page. I'm going to step up now and explain to you why the only proper decision is to go ahead and vote for Suburban Commando. Let me tell you a little something about Suburban Commando. So, Matt Kelly, as a child, was not a wrestling fan. He enjoyed it moderately, but he was mostly a Hulk Hogan fan. case in point, the second that Hulk Hogan stopped wrestling for the WWF, I stopped watching because I didn't care about the wrestling. I cared about the Hulkster. And that allowed me to go see a whole lot of really bad Hulk Hogan movies, ranging from Mr. Nanny, Santa with Muscles, and losing my collective shit when I saw Gremlins 2. But the movie that meant the most to me, and I watched repeatedly, was a little film called Suburban Commando. What is Suburban Commando, you might be asking? Good question, other me. The story of Suburban Commando is that Hulk Hogan is a bounty hunter. He is a bounty hunter in outer space who is one of the greatest bounty hunters of all time, but on one of his missions, he kind of sort of fucks up and allows a president to be murdered. And it is suggested to him by his colonel that maybe, just maybe, he needs to take a little break. So they set him up to go hide out on Earth for a couple months and lay low, relax, and get his collective shit together so that he can go back up in outer space and be the badass bounty hunter that he is. So he decides to move in with Christopher Lloyd and Shelley Duvall. While living with Christopher Lloyd and Shelley Duvall, he interjects a little bit of space-age crazy and builds up Christopher Lloyd's confidence and makes Shelley Duvall believe in herself again and helps their kids stand up to bullies and, is just this motivational dude. But he doesn't understand the way of the world. He doesn't understand mimes or video games. And it builds into lots of comedic little scenes. Unknowns to him, though, there is a rogue group of bounty hunters that are trying to find him, and they crash land on Earth, and that's when things get crazy. We've got aliens, we've got gunfights, we've got all types of crazy shit because Suburban Commando is a great movie, and you should see it, and you should watch it. And even if you don't vote for it, which is a mistake, you should still track down a copy and enjoy it with your friends and family because it is a delight. So what is my campaign promise? My campaign promise is this. I will constantly be talking like the Hulkster during that episode, brother, and I'm going to be flexing my 24-inch pythons in my bedroom while discussing that movie the entire time because this movie's great, it's hilarious, Scott and Adam don't even know how much they're going to love this movie, and the alien looks like the Predator if, they did the, Killer Clowns in Ernest Scared Stupid, like that they did the Predator in Suburban Commando. It was like, we got the mold, let's just use it. That is my campaign promise. This is why you should be voting for that movie and not Beastmaster, not what women want. They can't satisfy you the way that Suburban Commando could.
Nice.
Wow, I might just pick Suburban Commando.
Well, that was Student Bodies from 1981 as selected by me, but it's not always movie picks from ourselves. Sometimes it's movie picks from you. And the way that we find out about those is if you contact us at hmnpodcast@gmail.com. Additionally, if you want to go the next step into your fandom of our podcast, you can always swing by the Patreon page at patreon.com/hmnpodcast, where you have the ability to donate money to us on a monthly basis and get cool things like packages and newsletters letting you know what's going on in the lives of the three co-hosts and a bunch of other cool stuff. Or, you might be on a budget. We're all on a budget. Who knows what the, we just had another election. Who knows what's going to happen to our lives. But you can donate $1 a month, and we will follow you on Twitter. We'll give you a shout-out on the podcast, and you'll be helping us get $1 closer to our goals of being able to take this shtick on the road a little bit and visit you guys in different cities and states, do live events, all of that good jazz. That's all I've got to say. I'm curious, though, is there any other places where you could follow us or listen to us?
Yeah, I know for a fact that I run the Twitter over at HMN Podcast, and you can come interact with me. If you're a hot girl, I'll hit on you, and occasionally I get drunk and say stupid things on there. But you probably already knew that was going to
happen. And you can go to the less intrusive SoundCloud.com/horror movie night, and we have all of our episodes plus some bonus content from years past up on there for your listening pleasure, as well as on iTunes, where you can rate, review, and subscribe so that you never miss a moment of our inane ramblings.
Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next week.
Ladies and gentlemen, in order to achieve an R rating today, a motion picture must contain full frontal nudity, graphic violence, or an explicit reference to the sex act. Since this film has none of those, and since research has proven that R-rated films are by far the most popular with the movie-going public, the producers of this motion picture have asked me to take this opportunity to say, fuck you.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.